Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and it's a privilege to follow those heartfelt words from my friend, the member for Patterson. This is an incredibly hard debate for all of us, but I do think it's one of those days where you see Parliament shining through. I was here for the passing of Don Randall, and the love and affection for Don was something that was clear across the chamber. He was a hard man. He fought for his beliefs every day, but the Parliament united to honour his passing, and to see the same thing for Peter Murphy, the member for Dunkley, someone who it's a great honour of mine to say was a friend and comrade, is Parliament at its best, and I want to start with that. When I was sitting down to think about what I'd say about Peter in my contribution, the three words that struck with me that I knew had to be central, because they were central to Peter, was bravery, honesty, empathy. For me, they were the three characteristics that were personalities that characterised Peter's life and her service in this place. It's a life of immeasurable contribution to the people of this country and people beyond the borders of this country that Peter has made in such a short time, only 50 years. And I'll reflect on her parliamentary career as everyone else has, but I just want to spend a bit of time on the six roles that brought her here, because I think they characterise her fundamental being. They characterise how she wanted to live a life and contribute to her fellow human beings. And they're volunteer, public defender, barrister, law reformer, health advocate, and then policy advisor and chief of staff. So to volunteer her time at a local community legal centre. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but I do see a fair number of people coming through asking for legal assistance. And they do it because they've got nowhere else to turn to. Often their cases are hopeless, or they don't have the resources to pursue cases, or they don't have the opportunity to understand the legal system. So for Peter to volunteer at her community legal centre, give her time to fight for people without a voice, who by definition do not have the ability to turn to anyone else, just was a testament to her character. And then to be a senior public defender at Victoria Legal Aid must have been a remarkable experience. Legal aid performs such a hugely important role in our system, but the people who work there are under constant stress. They're under-resourced, they're having to deal with cases with very little background, with very little support. Often they're dealing with some of the most troubling cases in the system, fighting against structural injustice. And for Peter to be a public defender was another very significant contribution. And then just to be a barrister and argue before the courts of the land was a remarkable achievement. And then the one I think I could see shining through in everything she did in this place, which was as a team leader at the Victorian Law Reform Commission Deputy Speaker, to fight every day to reform the law, to make the law more accessible to all people, to argue for equality of access to the law, for justice for all, just demonstrated her commitment to improving the world. And then her advocacy on health issues, a director on the board of Peninsula Health, again advocating for people who didn't have a voice, advocating for people who the system had left behind. Deputy Speaker, that speaks to her character. And then finally, before entering Parliament, to be policy advisor and chief of staff to Brendan O'Connor in his role as Shadow Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations. That's when I had my first interactions with Peter, and she had a fierce intellect, and she was used to dealing with MPs and Shadow Ministers coming in with bright ideas or convictions, dealing with them respectfully, but being very clear when she disagreed with them, and developing good policy that we took to many election, and as the Leader of the House said, laid the groundwork for the very important workplace relations reforms that we've driven through this place. So I highlight those six roles because I would say, even if she never got elected to this place, even if she hadn't won Dunkley for the first time in decades for Labor, her life would have been well and truly lived, a life of making a massive contribution to helping her fellow human beings. But then she did get elected Deputy Speaker. She ran a magnificent campaign in a very tough year for Labor. 2019 was tough going for all Labor candidates and MPs, but particularly those trying to win seats against incumbents. And she ran a brilliant campaign, and then she went about actually implementing what she committed to. And I truly remember her magnificent first speech, and that was a speech that I had the honour of sitting near her while she delivered. And the sort of, I'll talk a bit about her honesty in a second around her cancer returning, but the 5 things she talked about in that speech, many other things, but the things that I think were so emblematic of such a wonderful person was the need to tackle disadvantage, arguing for equality of access to education, health and economic opportunity, which she fought for before she entered Parliament and dedicated her life to, her love of her local community, and her overarching ethos of not letting a day's opportunity pass by. But the other thing that first speeches are always challenging things for people, because you want to talk about your priorities, you want to talk about your community, you want to talk about what you animate. So you also want to talk about other things that are important to you. And the thing that struck me was she talked about her love of squash and the injustice in the lack of recognition for squash as an international sport. And I just found it amazing and refreshing that while talking about equality of access to education, while talking about the need to tackle disadvantage, she also wanted to tackle inequality in the sporting system by arguing for squash to get the recognition it did. And occasionally we talk about who are the great sports people of this place, and she undoubtedly was one of the greatest. And then, obviously, it came to the most poignant part of her speech, which is where she disclosed not just her battle with cancer, but the fact that it had returned. And for her to deliver what is the hardest speech for any of us, I'm convinced that the first speech is the hardest speech for anyone in this place. But for her to then be honest with people here and around the country and around the world about the return of cancer was remarkable bravery and remarkable honesty. And it's something that you could hear a pin drop in the chamber when she did that, and it was something of huge significance. And then her actions of MP. She did not let a single day pass. She lived and breathed the ethos of her speech. Every day she advocated for those doing it tough. She fought to support others, especially the critical role of carers and the rights of and needs of unpaid carers. She clearly support for those dealing with gambling addiction and leadership of that inquiry. She supported the victims of robo-debt. She dedicated many thousands of hours to raising the profile of women's health, and every day she celebrated her Bayside home community. These were her actions in this place every single day, and it was a remarkable contribution in such a short time, in only 4.5 years. Before concluding, I just want to reflect a bit on her honesty, her sometimes brutal honesty, and the member for Patterson talked about the rose, and I think I saw that in action in caucus and in this place. She did not suffer fools gladly. She was quite sick of men patronising women in this place. She was sick of hypocrites. I think hypocrisy was the thing she could not stand the most. And I was always very nervous when I got up to speak in front of Peta, because she had a truth detector, and if you were BSing, you could tell on her face that she was calling you out. And I think that honesty is more and more needed in this place, and I think it's a testament to her that she had the bravery and conviction to stand up for her community, but also to stand up and call out poor actions by anyone, not just on the other side of politics, but in her own party. So can I pass on my condolences to her parents, Bob and Jan, her sisters Jodie and Penny, and most in particular her husband Rod Glover, someone who I had the privilege of working with a decade ago. Rod, can I say how sorry I am on behalf of not just myself but the community of Shortland? We have lost such a magnificent human being. You've lost the love of your life, and we are all immeasurably poorer for her passing, but we are so much richer for her contribution. Vale, Peter Murphy.